What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be talking about how you can take advantage of auto ISO and letting the ISO run as high as you want to get the best shots possible in low light and really harsh light scenarios. So stay tuned for more so you can take an image like this and turn it into something like this. So starting out, what I like to do is I like to run all of my images through this piece of software here, which is DxO Pure Raw 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you right now a comparison between one of the images that I took, which is this one here, and then we're going to compare it with one of the files that DxO Pure Raw brought out of that as well. So the exact same picture. So this is raw file. This is DxO Pure Raw. So if we just pop that there and there, you can see on the right we've got the raw file, and on the left we've got the DxO Pure Raw file. So this is the DNG that DxO Pure Raw created. As you can see, if we zoom into 32% on both, what a difference. What a difference DxO Pure Raw has made to this file. Absolutely incredible. And this hasn't even been edited yet. There's no edit on this whatsoever. It's straight at the camera. So we haven't taken it into Lightroom or anything like that just yet. So what I'm going to do, 5221, we're going to go into Lightroom now, and we're going to find that file. So it'll be right down the bottom here somewhere. So you can see I've been messing about with it in general. And what we're going to do is we're going to reset the file. So let's reset it. Come on, develop settings, reset. So you can see here, this is the file that came out of DxO Pure Raw 4 without any adjustments whatsoever. So of course, what I'm going to do is crop it first, which, again, quite a heavy crop. Doesn't really matter to me, but it's quite a heavy crop just in general. And then you can see that this photo was shot at 20,000 ISO at f6.3, 1/250th of a second. Now, honestly, I probably got quite lucky with 1/25th of a second, or 1/250th of a second, because that's quite low. Luckily, it was in the perfect position where it wasn't flapping the wings, so you've got none of that real motion blur in the shot. But what I did do was I made sure that my ISO was set to auto. I let it go as high as it needed to, and we can just quickly go in, do a little bit of an edit on this. So it's put the ISO, the exposure down to 0.08. We can do whatever we want with this. So whether it's make it really bright or make it dark. I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. I'm also going to change the temperature a little bit so it's like this. But what you can also do is use the masking tools. So you can use the masking tool on the background. And this is one of my tips for just making the background look nicer, in terms of you might have a busy background like this. And what you want to do is in the actual mask here, mask 1, you can see that right there. If I turn the saturation down, you can see that it just makes it completely black and white. So that now is a black and white background, but that's not what I want. So what I want is to go 0 on that. And then down at the bottom here, we're going to go texture to -100. As you can see here, the texture is either more or less. Reducing the texture gets rid of that noise a little bit more. Clarity, you can kind of do the same sort of thing, so it's not as clear. And then what you can do is you can turn the sharpness and some of the other stuff down, which would really give it this really smooth background that's in this corner here. Again, what you can do is then, if you're happy with the way the image is, you can either darken the background or you can lighten it and do different things to get the final edit that you want. Again, another really clever thing to do is to select the subject on a different mask completely, as you can see here. Couldn't detect sky. I've clearly clicked the wrong thing. But yeah, trying to get the mask on the bird, which it has now. And what you can do is you can go into here, you can click sharpness and drag it all the way up to 100, or you can have it right in between. For whatever reason, I've found that sharpening it like this manually, as well as going through the denoising process and whatever else, really, really helps. And you saw what DxO Pure Raw 4 could do earlier. Well, if you have a look at this now, in terms of the way that the subject is and everything else, you can see that this is quite nicely sharp. It's a little bit blurry, a little bit thin. There's a little bit of an edge on the wing, but to be completely honest, you don't really notice that wing until you zoom right into stupid values at this point, because this image isn't that big anyway, because it's such a heavy crop. But what you could do as well is you could actually run it through denoise in Lightroom again to get an even cleaner image. So you can go from something like this to something like this in a matter of minutes, and that is really, really good. Now, my final actual edit of this came out really, really nice in my opinion, which was this one here and also this one here. So we ended up getting two separate images out of it that were completely different compositions, but both of these were taken at 20,000 ISO, and just look how good they came out. I mean, I couldn't ask for more, couldn't ask for better in terms of the way that it is. Like, the actual photos have come out so well considering the ISO numbers. Now, honestly, again, we have some other files in here as well of kingfishers and whatever else on the day, and some of these kingfisher shots came out really, really nice. Now, honestly, some of them aren't that great, but that's due to heat haze and whatever else, atmospheric stuff. But if you look at some of these images that I was able to capture, this was taken with pre-capture on the R7, as was this. And if I zoom in on this image, which it's not letting me do for some reason, you've got some rubber band in here with the thing of what's it called? You've got some rubber band in here with the wings in two separate sort of positions a little bit with the what they call it? It's not rubber banding. I'm trying to think. Rolling shutter. You've got a little bit of rolling shutter in the wing, a little bit of blur, stuff like that. But it's really not that bad. And when you look at this image, it's almost perfect. Yes, it's a little noisy. But again, these were taken at upwards of 15,000 ISO. I mean, if you look at some of the ISO numbers that I have, some of them are literally 25,000 ISO. This is 25,600 ISO. So when it comes to it, I feel like the best way of doing it, I mean, look at the settings on this, right? So what I decided to do with this was shutter speed up high, so I would get the wings perfectly. And I would also freeze the action without there being any blur in the wings whatsoever. What I also did was make sure that my lens, which is the big, hefty 150 to 600 from Sigma, this, which is f5.6 to 6.3. What I did was I set it at f8, which is where it's sharpest. Now, you may be thinking, well, if I was shooting at f6.3 instead of f8, then my ISO value would have been lower. It would. However, that's not where the lens is sharpest. So you've got to take advantage of the scenario that you've got. You've got to take advantage of the different things that are going on. And what you can also do is you can even use black and white to your advantage a little bit. Because even here, that image looks really, really good. Now, if I take black and white off and then I adjust some of the colours a little bit, I throw a mask on here and change the bird a little bit more, change the background a little bit more, blur the background out a little bit more with the textures and the different things that I showed you in the earlier image. You can turn that image there, which you've just seen, into something like this, which isn't perfect, but it's pretty darn good. And I've got so many images of this Barno that was flying around that are some of the best images I've ever taken of a Barno at the highest ISO that I've ever achieved on my camera without ruining the images completely. And these are all fairly heavy crops as well, with some of them. Some of these are fairly heavy crops. These would run through DxO Pure Raw 4, then edited in Lightroom. And you can see that some of these images are definitely up there with some of the best ones I have ever taken. So it just goes to show that you can really, really take advantage of your kit by allowing Auto ISO to take advantage of itself and to push the ISO higher when you really need it. Because if you do, you start getting images like this in low light scenarios, and you can make it look like it's daylight, even though it's not, and come out with some images that are incredibly, incredibly sharp. Again, this photo was shot at 25,600 ISO. F8, 1/2500th of a second. On a Canon R7 and a Sigma 150 to 600. To put that into perspective, these photos were taken at such high ISO that people would just bend them off. But here we are, 20,000 ISO for these two. Again, some of the best photos I have ever taken. And yet, people would just throw these photos away. But because I persevered and I decided, I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit these, I'm going to have a look what DxO Pure Raw can do. I'm going to put them into Topaz Photo AI and Lightroom and Denoise and trying to figure out the best way of doing it. And I came up with some absolutely stunning photos that I could only ever have dreamt of, honestly. Some of these photos are by far my best photos of 2024 and my photography career so far. So to say that high ISO ruins photos and you shouldn't ever let the ISO go above like 500 or a couple of thousand, I don't think that sits at all anymore. I don't think you can say that anymore because the technology that we have in terms of the AI software with Topaz or DxO Pure Raw or Lightroom's Photo Denoise or even Photoshop, I think in the digital darkroom, you can now save some of those images that you wouldn't have been able to save in the past, especially on DSLRs and stuff like that. But I also think some of the images that were taken on DSLRs could possibly be saved now that couldn't back in the day. I think the technology is coming along that much and has come along that well that we can now rely on it a little bit more and allow the cameras to push the boundaries a little bit to see what we can actually get in terms of quality photos, and it may surprise you just how far you can push it. Like I said, some of these photos were taken at like 600 ISO or 400 ISO, and yet others 25,600 ISO, which is where this camera maxes out because that's what I've set. It's where the default is. It can go to 5200 ISO, and I experimented with that, and it didn't go so well. But I feel like now I've got the settings right, and I've got the exposure compensation and whatever else set in the right way. The exposure to compensation, by the way, has not been touched. It's just on 0. So I feel like this is a very good thing for us photographers. We don't need to worry about images so much and throw away all the high ISO files just because they are high ISO anymore. Personally, I'm going to be shooting at high ISO and keeping to shoot at high ISO to give myself the best chance with auto ISO to be able to get some of the images that I could only dream of. Because with pre-capture now on a lot of different cameras, the pre-capture mode is fantastic. Yes, it's a little bit of a pain to edit the files on the R7, get them off the computer and whatever else. But I don't mind that anymore because I've just gotten used to it. But the fact is, I can get images that I've only ever dreamed of. I hold the shutter, the action happens, and I've captured it as long as I remember to actually press the shutter down. Unfortunately, it's not customizable. I'd like a little less or a little more time sometimes when it comes to that, but that's just how it is. I've got to get used to it and use it to the best of my ability. But what I can say is that high ISO files are no longer a problem in my head, as long as you get your other settings right. So your other settings, like I said, just to conclude, you need your high shutter speed for birds in flight or whatever. You need to make sure that you're on either a tripod, a sturdy platform, if your shutter speed is lower. And then if not, make sure your shutter speed's high. And if your aperture is wide open, then you're going to let as much light in as possible. But do stop it down if it means that your lens is going to be sharper. Like I said before, my lens is wide open at 6.3, but it's sharpest at f8. So I immediately started to pull it to f8 and just take as many photos as possible, resulting in some of the best photos I've ever taken. So hopefully you guys will learn something useful today. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. I will talk to you guys in the next one.